A casual shopping trip turns into chaos when a rich woman calls the cops on a black man, assuming he doesn't belong, until she learns he just bought the entire mall. What happens next will leave you speechless. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon at Bayside Galleria Mall, one of the fanciest shopping centers in Miami. Families strolled past designer boutiques, couples enjoyed coffee in upscale cafes, and shoppers admired expensive jewelry in glass displays. The kind of place where appearances seem to matter more than anything else. In the middle of this scene, Ethan Williams, a tall black man in his mid-30s, walked into the mall, dressed in a simple grey hoodie and jeans. His sneakers were clean but far from flashy, and he carried a well-worn leather backpack slung over one shoulder. He had a relaxed, confident air about him as he scanned the directory near the entrance. Ethan wasn't here to browse. He had something very specific in mind and a reason for being here. But to one onlooker, he didn't look like he belonged. Madeline Hawthorne, a wealthy woman in her late 40s, sat sipping a cappuccino at an outdoor table just outside the Louis Vuitton store. She wore oversized sunglasses, a designer scarf, and a gold watch that caught the light with every move she made. She prided herself on being an observer of people, but in reality her assumptions were often rooted in prejudice. The moment Ethan stepped into view, Madeline's eyes narrowed. She watched him carefully as he walked past high-end stores, occasionally glancing into the windows. In her mind, Ethan wasn't a shopper. He was suspicious. She noticed he wasn't carrying any shopping bags and wasn't dressed like the usual customers she was used to seeing here. "Excuse me," she said, flagging down a nearby security guard, a young man named Jason who seemed more interested in checking his phone than monitoring the mall. Jason looked up, startled, and walked over to her table. "Yes, ma'am. Is something wrong?" Madeline leaned in, lowering her voice. "That man," she said, nodding in Ethan's direction, "has been walking around for a while. He doesn't look like he's here to shop. I think you should keep an eye on him." Jason hesitated, unsure what to make of her concern. Ethan wasn't doing anything suspicious, just walking through the mall like any other customer. "Ma'am, are you sure he's not causing any trouble?" Madeline's tone sharpened. "I've seen enough to know when someone's up to no good. You need to do your job and make sure he's not here to cause problems." Jason gave a reluctant nod and walked off toward Ethan, though he didn't feel right about the situation. Ethan, meanwhile, had stopped in front of a jewelry store, looking at a display of watches through the window. As Jason approached, Ethan turned to him with a polite smile. "Hey, how's it going?" Ethan said casually, noticing the uniform. Jason nodded, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Hi, sir. Just doing a routine check. Are you looking for something specific today?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying question. "Actually, I'm here to make a purchase. Is there a problem?" Before Jason could respond, Madeline appeared behind him, her heels clicking loudly against the polished floor. She crossed her arms and gave Ethan a once-over. "You don't need to pretend, young man," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We all know why you're here." Ethan blinked, stunned by her boldness. "Excuse me? And who are you, exactly?" "I'm someone who cares about this community," she replied, lifting her chin. "And I won't stand by while someone tries to take advantage of it." Ethan let out a small laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Take advantage? Lady, I don't even know what you're talking about." Madeline turned to Jason, her voice rising. "Call the police. He's clearly up to something." Jason hesitated, torn between his job and his better judgment. "Ma'am, I don't think that's necessary." "Now!" Madeline snapped, cutting him off. Jason sighed, pulling out his radio. Moments later, 2 police officers arrived, their expressions neutral but alert. Ethan stood his ground, calm but clearly annoyed. A small crowd started to form, phones coming out to record the scene. One of the officers, Officer Martinez, stepped forward. "What seems to be the issue here?" Madeline wasted no time. This man has been wandering around, acting suspiciously. I'm sure he doesn't belong here." Ethan raised his hands slightly, palms out. "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just here to shop." But apparently that's not allowed in her world. Martinez studied Ethan carefully, noting his calm demeanor and lack of anything resembling a threat. "Sir, do you have any ID on you?" Ethan nodded, reaching slowly into his pocket to pull out his wallet. "Sure. But before we go any further, I'd like to understand what I'm being accused of." Madeline interrupted before Martinez could answer. "Isn't it obvious? Look at him!" The crowd gasped, and a woman in the back muttered, "Wow, seriously?" Martinez frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was going. Ethan handed over his ID, and Martinez glanced at it, his eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Williams," he said, his tone shifting. You're that Ethan Williams, aren't you?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I am. And if you don't mind, I'd like to finish what I came here for." Madeline looked confused. "What are you talking about? Who is he?" Martinez turned to her, his expression now stern. "Ma'am, this man is a well-known entrepreneur. He's the CEO of a major investment firm." Madeline's face drained of color. But Ethan wasn't done. "Since I'm already the center of attention, I might as well make an announcement," he said, his voice carrying through the crowd. "I wasn't just here to shop. I was here to finalize a deal." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I just bought this mall." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Madeline's jaw dropped. For a moment the mall fell completely silent. Then the crowd erupted in murmurs, a mix of disbelief and excitement. Madeline stood frozen, her face pale as she tried to process Ethan's words. "You bought the mall?" she stammered, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. Ethan turned to her, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes, ma'am. I signed the paperwork this morning. I own every store here now, including the one you were sitting in front of, enjoying your coffee." The crowd began to cheer, some clapping and others recording Ethan with their phones. Jason, the security guard, gave a nervous smile, unsure whether to join in or stay quiet. Even Officer Martinez struggled to hide a grin. Madeline's lips quivered as she tried to regain control of the situation. "This has to be a joke. Someone like you doesn't just buy a place like this." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his voice steady but firm. "Someone like me? You mean someone who doesn't fit your narrow idea of what success looks like? Let me guess. You assumed I couldn't afford to shop here, let alone own the whole place." Madeline opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She glanced around, realizing all eyes were on her, waiting to see how she'd defend herself. Ethan took a step closer, his tone calm but commanding. "Here's the thing, ma'am. I've worked hard for everything I have. I built my company from the ground up, and while you were busy judging me based on how I look, I was busy sealing the deal to make this mall mine." The crowd cheered again, and someone shouted, "Go, Ethan!" Madeline's face turned bright red. "I wasn't judging you. I was just trying to keep the community safe." Ethan shook his head. "Safe from what? A man minding his own business. You didn't call the cops because you were worried about safety. You called them because you saw me as a threat, even though I did nothing wrong." Officer Martinez stepped forward, clearing his throat. "He's right, ma'am. There was no reason to involve us, and honestly, this kind of false accusation is why trust in law enforcement is so fragile right now." Madeline looked around desperately, but it was clear she had no allies in the crowd. Even Jason, the security guard, avoided her gaze. Ethan sighed, his expression softening slightly. "I didn't come here to make a scene. I just wanted to enjoy my day like anyone else. But since this happened, let's turn it into a teachable moment." He turned to address the crowd, his voice clear and strong. "Judging someone by their appearance is lazy. It's harmful, and it says more about you than the person you're judging. If we want things to change, it starts with each of us. calling out this kind of behavior and doing better. The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan smiled, giving a small nod of thanks before turning back to Madeline. I hope this experience makes you think twice before making assumptions about someone in the future. Madeline looked down, too embarrassed to respond. She grabbed her designer purse and hurried away, the sound of her heels fading into the distance. Ethan glanced at Officer Martinez and Jason. "Thanks for staying professional, gentlemen. I appreciate it." Martinez nodded. "Of course, Mr. Williams, and for the record, I think this place is in good hands now." Ethan chuckled. "I plan to make some changes. Better security training for starters." He gave Jason a pointed but good-natured look, and Jason laughed nervously. As the crowd began to disperse, people came up to shake Ethan's hand and thank him for standing up to the injustice. A young boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and pointed at Ethan, whispering, "Mom, I want to be like him when I grow up." Ethan overheard and crouched down to the boy's level. "Work hard, stay curious, and never let anyone tell you what you can or can't do," he said with a smile. The boy grinned and nodded enthusiastically. As Ethan walked toward the exit, he took one last look around the mall. This wasn't just a business investment for him. It was an opportunity to create a space where everyone felt welcome, no matter who they were or what they looked like. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the parking lot. Ethan pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hey, it's me. The deal's done. The mall's ours. Let's start planning how we're going to turn this place into something special." As he climbed into his car and drove off, Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He hadn't just proven a point. He'd taken another step toward building a legacy that went beyond wealth. And for Madeline, the memory of that day would stay with her for a long time. A reminder that you can't judge someone's worth by what they wear, what they drive, or how they look, because sometimes the person you underestimate the most might just own the ground you're standing on.